In the world of League, or any mainstream competitive game, whenever you hear the word meta, it usually refers to what champions, items, or strategies are most effective at their current moment. Subsequently, there's this unspoken notion that players have to formulate their gameplay and perspective around it. Metas come and go all the time, as balance patches or player discovery alters how we understand the game, but there are times in history when a meta has become so overbearingly dominant that harboring even the slightest desire to do anything else bordered on intentionally trying to lose the game.
Gauge supports that can also use the Ardent Censer. Playing into Ardent Censer and Winsu's plus the Ardent Censer. Ardent Censer though starting to turn the fight. Yeah, let's talk about the Ardent Censer.
Having been around for 12 years at this point, there have been plenty of instances where we had to encounter these tier 0 strategies or builds that siphoned all semblance of enjoyment out of the game, sometimes for months or even years at a time. So today, we're going to go through some of the most toxic metas throughout League's 12 years of release, going on 13, explaining why they were so pervasive and their lasting effects on the game hereafter. To preface, what I'll be doing in this video is give a brief rundown of a few metas, what they were about, what caused them, how they affected the game for better or worse, usually worse, and then give my thoughts on why they were so problematic and what could have been done to prevent them. I'm also going to refrain from any super old stuff like Sunfire Evelyn because that was like Season 0, Season 1 kind of stuff. And also, I'm not going to refer to single champion dominance like when Aphelios made everyone question their sanity when he was first released. So let's get to it. But really quickly, I just want to let you guys know that I partnered up with Apex Gaming PCs and released a line of gaming computers for anyone looking to upgrade their hardware this holiday season. Apex offers cutting-edge budget and high-end rigs that are fully customizable and made on the spot, so you don't have to go through all the trouble of finding parts and building it yourself. To get you started, I have 3 preset computers that range in price and specs, but like I said, you can get them adjusted accordingly if you want any specific part. If you use my discount code Vars or the link down below, you can get up to $250 off your next purchase, and Apex does offer financing in case you don't have the capital to pay all at once. Definitely suggest you check it out if you feel like treating yourself this holiday season, but for now, let's get back into the video. Things are going to be a bit different today. Usually you're supposed to save the best for last, but I'm going to start with the first. With no caveat, no asterisk, no ifs, ands, or buts, the most toxic meta to ever plague League of Legends, at least to me, would have to go to the dreaded Ardent Censer. The premise of this item was very simple. It was a niche item supports to go for if their team possessed a lot of auto attackers like Master Yi, Kog'Maw, Jax, that kind of stuff. While the stats were rather gold efficient and everything you would want to have on enchanters, the specificity of it is what kept it in check. It was strictly for on-hit damage. During the preseason, however, a new effect was given to it, where it would heal you equal to the bonus on-hit damage, so it went from an HP damage to an HP drain, essentially doubling the value of the buff, going from a net 20 in damage to a net 40 in damage and healing. Interestingly, this alone didn't draw too much attention. It wasn't until version 7.2 when Ardent Censer got another massive buff, increasing the scaling from 20 flat to 20 to 35 based on level, almost double. And remember, we're talking 70 bonus damage in essence from the heals. One other thing is that the healing wasn't even based on damage, it was just a flat amount. Your opponent could have 9,000 magic resist and you would still heal for 20 to 35 HP per hit. Now imagine if you were Kog'Maw with Runon's Hurricane, every single auto would heal you for 105 HP. So long as he wasn't CC'd, he was pretty much invincible. The sheer overwhelming power this item granted was able to overshadow the niche usage of it. It didn't matter if your team didn't have a lot of auto attackers, attack speed, on-hit damage, on-hit sustain in tandem with how gold efficient the item was in stats alone made this one of the most overtuned items in the history of League. Ardent Censer would remain a stable presence throughout all of Season 7, and as we entered that year's World Championship, Riot would release a quote-unquote balance patch that sought to nerf the item's capacity by reducing 20 to 35 scaling to a flat 25 on both attack speed and health drain. Technically, this is a nerf in the late game, but they compensated by making it stronger in the early game, defeating the purpose of the nerf altogether. Every match boiled down to whichever team could rush Ardent Censer first. AD carries would go Relic Shield Start to give this support as much gold as possible solely to purchase this item. Top, jungle, and mid were all but irrelevant for the most part, especially in solo queue. Patch 7.19 would eventually remove the healing component but replace it with a buff that is granted to both the support and their teammate. And then in version 7.21, which I believe was right before preseason, the attack speed and on-hit damage were completely gutted, finally ending the cursed item's reign of terror. What's really strange about this meta is that for how all-consuming it was, it lasted for an extremely long time, practically an entire season. Players were quick to abuse Ardent Censer long before Worlds began, yet there was no response. Bear in mind, Grievous Wounds wasn't upgraded from 2540 to 4060 until Season 11's mythic items, so there was no effective and easy way to stop Ardent Censer, let alone everything else the champion had to offer. Such action, or lack thereof, would be uncharacteristic in this day and age. The moment anything becomes tier 0, it gets nerfed almost immediately. I actually believe that was due to Ardent Censer. If you think about it, ever since then, Riot would be really quick to pull the trigger on nerfing a strong item, rune, or champion into oblivion in a matter of weeks, which I think is too hasty, but I'd much rather that than the alternative. The issue behind this was simple. They wanted to make Ardent Censer more of a worthwhile purchase, but the way they went about that was incorrect. By adding on hit healing, they negated what kept Ardent Censer niche in the first place. I think the current iteration was the right way to go about it, where it would grant the boost to both parties. Considering most enchantments are ranged, they're likely to weave in auto attacks while waiting for their abilities to come back up. Even after being reduced to a shadow of its former self, Ardent Censer is still ridiculously gold efficient, providing up to 3.74 times more value than the cost if you can give this buff to your entire team at the same time. For some enchanters, that's child's play like Sona, Soraka, and Janna, while others can make it happen through a combination of Moonstone Renewer and Font of Life. Now that I think about it, wow, it's been 5 years since Ardent Censer, holy crap! Up next, we're gonna go back further in time to a more archaic generation of League of Legends, roughly 10 years ago, the Black Cleaver meta. Black Cleaver, as you know, is a staple item, a cornerstone of the vast majority of divers, juggernauts, a few skirmishers, assassins, and even marksmen. Unlike Ardent Censer, it's retained its identity from the start of its conception way back in Season 1 to now. It granted attack damage, health, and cooldown reduction, now known as ability haste. Upon dealing physical damage, it would reduce the armor of a target by a percentage, stacking up to a cap. What made this item a staple in so many champions was how all-purpose it was. Armor is a stat present on every member of the cast, from the squishiest enchanters to the most durable tanks. Therefore, this item's passive will always be useful to varying degrees. The attack damage and ability haste makes it exceptionally useful on any ability casters, but even champions who deal the bulk of their damage through auto attacks can make it work, since autos are physical attacks at the end of the day. A long time ago though, Black Cleaver's stats used to be 250 health, 50 attack damage, 10% cooldown reduction, and most notably 15 flat armor penetration. The kicker is that the armor strike component was not a unique passive, as you can see on screen. It just said passive, meaning you could build multiple Black Cleavers and get the full benefits of each one. What happened was that each Black Cleaver would apply a stack, so in theory with enough Black Cleavers, you would get max shred on a target with one attack. The average non-tank champ back then would have somewhere between 80 to 100 armor, so 30% shred would bring it down to 55 to 70. Then you would have 90 flat armor penetration, meaning versus any squishy target you basically did true damage. I believe at the time there was also the Mastery Sunder, which gave you another 5 armor pen, and Weapon Expertise, which was another 8%. So to tally it all up, at 5 Black Cleavers, assuming you still had boots, you would gain 1250 bonus health, 250 bonus attack damage, 40% CDR, 95 flat armor penetration, and by your 4th Black Cleaver, any auto attack or damaging ability would instantly shred 30% of the target's armor. Any and every physical damage dealer in the game would just run Black Cleaver. It's true damage, like even against tanks you would basically do true damage. At least with Ardent Censer, the only ones who built it were supports and the occasional Iron Jungle or Karma top. But during preseason 2013 and early season 3, everyone was running Black Cleaver. The only counterplay against someone stacking Black Cleaver was to stack Black Cleavers yourself, or stack HP, seeing its armor was practically useless. Fun fact, Black Cleaver meta was partially responsible for Admog's meta shortly after, as it had the same basic principle, but instead of making your target squishy, you made yourself invincible. The very first patch of Season 3 would attempt to slow down Black Cleaver stacking by reducing the stats and needing to get 5 stacks instead of 4, but ultimately in version 3.9 they axed the entire thing by applying only 1 stack of armor shred in a single instance. All traces of Black Cleaver's abusability would then be shut down in Season 5, where they would remove the flat armor penetration altogether. Black Cleaver's escalation was mostly a design oversight, as the item on its own was perfectly balanced. It's just they never thought to consider what would happen if someone tried to build multiple copies of it. I'm pretty sure the Black Cleaver meta is what would eventually give rise to the practice of applying unique passives to everything, to prevent this very issue from happening in the future, although it would be interesting if Rabadon's death cap could stack.
Making so much money.
Moving on for the next meta, let's go forward in time to Season 8. Now by this point, I think the trauma from past escapades is caught up to Riot, and they would develop this zero tolerance policy for anything that compromised build diversity or fostered a degenerate experience or league. But that doesn't mean they thought things through. They would clean up the mess after they made it, but that wouldn't stop them from making a mess in the first place, and one of them was Kleptomancy meta spawning shortly after the rune system overhaul in pre-season 8, also known as Runes Reforged. The idea was to make runes a more central part of a champion's gameplay by having keystones that directly influence their playstyle. For example, Predator would give you a speed boost for your first attack, or Face Rush would make you more slippery during combat. Kleptomancy was drawn up to encourage brief trades with your opponent, strike fast and get out, hopefully with a little something extra. It operated in a spellblade fashion, where upon using an ability, your next basic attack would grant bonus gold and a chance for a consumable item, ranging from potions to wards to free hotel shampoo size elixirs or just more gold. On very rare occasions, you would even get an elixir of skill, which would allow you to rank up an ability as if you leveled up, which was insanely broken. Players got onto what was essentially free gold, and any champion with a low cooldown, low mana cost ability who could apply on-hit effects from a safe distance or without much commitment would run Klepto. Coincidentally, many of these champions also happen to have rather poor early games and/or a way to poke you for those items, further incentivizing them to take this rune for one simple goal: to reach their late game power spike faster and more safely. So champions like Fiora, Gangplank, Kayle, Ezreal would Q spam on you or E-spam for Kayle during laning phase, continuously racking up gold and free items, allowing them to scale faster without having to take any substantial risk. At the start, Klepto was very overtuned. Some players were averaging almost 1500 to 2000 gold in free stuff by 10 to 12 minutes, so in version 8.2 they significantly reduced the rune's drop rate in the early game and decreased it even further after 15 minutes. While this did lower the efficiency of Klepto, it still didn't prevent players from abusing it since, free gold is free gold. So in version 8.23, they halved the drop rate again and split it across 2 auto attacks, trying to bring the rune back to its intended purpose of rewarding short burst trades, not poke damage. Even so, that still didn't stop players from using it as a poke tool. Come pre-season 10, Klepto was replaced with Prototype Omnistone, arguably the most pointless rune in the game, which I actually made a video on if you're interested. In its defense, Kleptomancy wasn't as pervasive as Black Cleaver or Ardent Censer. It's not like everyone was using it in every game. The problem was, the champions who did ran it were using it to bypass their most vulnerable point, the early game. It doesn't make for a fun experience when you're a Garen and the enemy GP can just Q spam on you over and over and over at no risk to his own life and have 2 items by 20 minutes while you're stuck at 1 just by playing laning phase. They would eventually swap out Prototype Omnistone with First Strike, a keystone that's still somewhat prone to being abused by poke champs but more proportionally rewards those who go for quick trades like burst mages or assassins. Okay, we have one last one, and I know the video is running kinda long, so I'll make it brief. This is probably one many of you have been waiting for me to talk about: Season 5 to 7's tank meta. Humorously, we're on the precipice of another potential tank meta entering Season 13, with the new tank item changes that followed after the durability update. From Season 5 to around Season 7, there was an ostensible lack of damage. Sounds crazy, I know, with all the damage we've been exploiting to over the past 5 years. This also coincided with tank items being exceptionally overtuned, giving rise to the deadly combo of Sunfire Cape or Cinderhulk if you were a jungler, Iceborne Gauntlet, and Spirit Visage. Around the same time, tank busting items were few and far between. Not just in terms of champions, items like Last Whisper were horribly inefficient early on, and most champions didn't have the base stats to survive tanks. Additionally, this was still back when we were in the old mastery system, so we didn't have runes like Cutdown, Conqueror, etc. Meanwhile, tanks had the Keystone Mastery Courage of the Colossus, which is basically the Fimbulwinter Shield passive we have today. This universal absence of damage reached a breaking point in 2017 when Hauntzer famously tanked over 30 tower shots in one teamfight on Nautilus and survived. Granted, he was supported by Lee Sin and Nami, but it goes to show you how excessively overtuned defensive stats were, and it's not like Hauntzer was playing Malphite and had 6 armor items. He just had Sunfire Cape, Frozen Heart, and Ninja Tabbies. Alongside standard tanks like Nautilus, Maokai, Sejuani, Gragas, many VGUs were also targeted at tanks: Poppy, Shen, Galio, and Warwick. Non-tank champions would also dabble in this combo to see how far they would go, giving rise to the infamous Tank Echo, Tank Fizz, Tank Akali, Tank Nidalee, and so on, where they would rely on their base damage and defensive abilities to slowly but surely beat you down over time. Since most of them were assassins, a simple numbers change like reducing their base damage in favor of more scaling would do the trick. Again, just like Ardent Censer and Black Cleaver, this was never really a tier 0 meta where all 5 members of one team were playing tanks. Mostly just top laners and occasionally junglers, which is why the meta lasted for almost 2 years before it was eventually phased out. But much of what made tank meta so problematic was the lack of counterplay for it. Items, runes, or even stuff like how much damage turrets would do. Actually, if you notice, Season 7 is roughly around the time when we would see a noticeable increase in percent health damage or true damage on new champions. Kayn, Ornn, Zoe, Kai'Sa, Pyke, sort of, Sylas depending on the ultimate, Yuumi, Qiyana, Senna, Sett, Lilia, Yone, so on and so forth, all have a modicum of percent health damage or true damage, be it current health, missing health, or max health. Consequently, that would result in an arguably more degenerate span of time where everyone was getting one-shotted left and right, regardless of if you were a tank or a Soraka. Riot has a tendency to overcorrect on things. The dynamic between how much damage a tank should be able to withstand and how much damage a carry should be able to deal ebbs and flows all the time. Right now we're just recovering from that and maybe entering another tank meta come Season 13, but I have a feeling it won't be as prominent as last time. Even though I criticize Riot a lot for struggling to learn from their mistakes, I'm by no means saying they never learn. It's interesting to see the long-term effects those toxic metas had on the game. Ardent Censer meta is what made Riot pull the trigger on nerfing overpowered items more quickly. Black Cleaver meta is what made Riot add unique passes to every item so you only have reason to buy one of them. Tank meta is what made new champions and reworks have a lot of tank busting in their kit, and tank busting items and runes became more accessible. We all like to complain about how far gone the game is now, and it is, but it would be completely false to say the past wasn't filled with its own share of catastrophes. Okay, video's running long, my throat hurts, so we're gonna end things off here. In my opinion, Ardent Censer meta reigns supreme as the most toxic meta in the game's history, but I know many League boomers who would argue Black Cleaver meta was even worse. Let me know in the comments which meta you think was the worst, or if you believe there was something even worse than the 4 I covered today. I know there's still a ton of other metas I missed like Banner of Command, but we'd be here forever at that point. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and if you'd like to support me further, check out my Patreon. By donating, you get access to benefits for all 3 of my channels, Vars, Vars 2, and Vars 3. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.